What's up, you guys? I'm Vance. I just had my track Desperate Only drop on Elliptical Melodies just a few days ago. And since it's been released, a couple of you hit me up asking about some of the processing chains and some of the methods that I used to achieve the end result that ended up getting released by Elliptical Sun. So I thought I'd open up the project and share some of the insights and approaches that I used to processing some of the main channels within the project. Oddly enough, the two main topics that I've been asked about are the processing on the lead synth, which is labeled arpeggiator here, and then the processing on my high percussions, my shakers, hi-hats, cymbals, etc., etc. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about my approaches on both of them because they're actually pretty similar, even though both channels are serving wildly different purposes within the project. So we'll start with the lead synth. I'll solo it so you kind of get the general vibe of what it sounds like. Very quick fire, rapid sequence that helps drive the momentum of the song, especially through the back half of it. And to achieve that very warm, crisp, breathy, airy kind of vibe, most of that, the heavy lifting of that is done by two plugins, which is going to be the CQ out of Sound Toys and then the Decapitator also out of Sound Toys. FabFilter Saturn is a great distortion plugin that's doing a little bit and adding a little bit of brightness and mid-range thickness to the sound. But I'm mainly going to spend the time talking about Decapitator and CQ. Decapitator is an amazing distortion plugin. I've just picked it up about 4 months ago. And any producer will tell you that it's one of their go-to plugins, and it's quickly becoming one of mine. It has a bunch of different ways that it distorts the sound. When I'm doing synths, I usually go for A and T styles. I don't exactly know what they're modeling, what hardware gear they're modeling in each of them. I just know what they sound like, and they're the ones that I like. I'll turn the drive up all the way so you hear a drastic change in the sound. And then dial it back to about 4, which is what I have on the record. You can already tell how just the 4 adds a little bit of grit, a little bit of thickness, and a little bit of just added edge to it, which helps it kind of punch through and also start veering away from just a very digital sounding source material, which is what it would sound like if we just played the dry, I think it's like a Spire and Diva are the two synths layered together creating this lead. But it begins to shy away from that digital sounding instrument into a warmer, thicker sound that you would expect out of an analog source. The next is going to be the CQ, and I went pretty crazy on the settings on this one. You'll notice the high frequencies are turned up to 9 and the mids are getting boosted by 4. What the CQ is an analog emulation equalizer. So it's going to color the sound, going to boost the frequencies in a much more natural and much more sonically pleasing way than what an EQ8 might do. Turning up the high frequencies on an EQ8 by 9 will give a much thinner, almost too crisp, unpleasing kind of coloration to the sound that you want to avoid. But doing the same thing with like CQ or the API out of Waves, will color the sound in a much better way, much more pleasing way, and it's going to give it a bit more breath and help it stick out more in the mix. So I'll turn it off. Kind of sounds good, pleasing, soft, but when I turn it on, the high frequencies that are being added by both the Saturn and the Decapitator are accentuated, brought out more through the use of boosting quite drastically these two bands right here. Without those, it would sound soft, weak, and not very aggressive, especially when you're playing it on a bigger system. But because of these two plugins, it pops, it sounds crisp, and it almost sounds like I spent a ton of money recording it on an expensive outboard synthesizer, when really I just used a few pieces of mildly expensive in-the-box plugins. So that's a lead synth. But now I'm going to move my attention over to the high percussion bus right here. I'll solo it again so you get the general vibe of what it's doing by itself. It's a very live sounding, washed out in a good way kind of channel. And that's achieved through 3 main plugins that are doing the heavy lifting, which I have the OTT here, a reverb preset off of Ableton's stock reverb, and I'll talk about the stock reverb here in a second, and then once again the familiar face of the CQ. So what the OTT is doing, and any producer tutorial you watch will recommend that the OTT is probably the best free plugin that any producer can buy. And what it is doing is essentially bringing out, compressing, over-compressing some of the higher frequencies and kind of squashing all of it together, and then all the different channels, all the open hi-hats, closed hi-hats, shakers, and other supporting elements, squashing it together so it all sounds like one cohesive rack of drums, and then accentuating these higher frequencies here as they're boosted quite substantially. Here, the dry wet down to 14, so it's just a touch of all the thing that's going on, but it adds some extra snap, some extra like thwack almost, and glues it all together. So with it off, and then with it on. It's very subtle. If you're listening just on your basic laptop speakers, you may not hear the difference, but it is adding a bit of extra crispness that starts stepping away from a digital source material, moving into a more crisp sounding live analog sounding channel as the end result. The next is the Ableton stock reverb, and I usually shy away from using the stock reverb because I think it sounds tinny, fake, and a little bit too bright, but when applied to, well, very metallic, high-sounding percussions, those are all qualities that are quite pleasing, and it helps achieve the end result that I'm looking for. Normally, Valhalla reverb is my go-to reverb when I'm putting it on like pianos, synths, and almost anything other than hi-hats. But in this specific situation, I want that kind of thin, tinny quality, which is why I reached for this reverb specifically. And then similar kind of methodology as the lead synth, but I reached for the CQ just to help accentuate what everything else in this chain has been already doing. I'm trying to add some extra breath to that top end, maybe a little bit of added boost to some other frequencies, but mainly adding a breath by about 5 decibels to the upper frequencies. I'll turn it off. They're soft, they're subdued, they're pulled back in the mix where it sounds good, but adding this extra breath to it adds that extra, that shiny kind of veneer over the top that takes it that final step away from sounding like digital source material and into analog, bright, pleasing sounding analog kind of samples, analog sounding channel. So anyway, those are the 2 channels that I'm getting the most questions about. So again, I want to take some time out of my day to kind of share some insights into what exactly is going on within this project. Again, this is my track, Desperate Only, which was dropped on Elliptical Sun Melodies just a few days ago. Once again, thank you all for all the positive feedback that I've gotten. This goes all the way back from the initial A&Rs, kind of helping me find the last couple steps to getting it sounding as polished as it does now, to all of the smiling faces that have been hearing it on the dance floors of my sets over the past few months. This has been one of my favorite records that I've ever produced, and I couldn't have done it without the combined help of Elliptical Sun, all of my favorite producer buddies that I have messaged the iterations of this track, gotten feedback on, and all my fans, all my listeners, wherever you may be hiding. So I'm Will Vance. Keep listening to my music. Keep listening to Elliptical Sun. We all have some great stuff coming down in the pipeline. So keep your eyes and ears peeled to everything that we have coming up in the near future. Until next time, guys, I'm Will Vance. Peace out. Thanks again.